Let's talk to Ricardo. He is from ActivTrades. Very good morning to you,
Morning,
Ricardo.
Nick.
Right, Fed minutes last night. Obviously, Mr. Trump's got his views on US interest rates. I have my views on US interest rates. What are the Fed's latest thoughts?
Well, the Fed's reading the minutes yesterday. One is pretty much left with the idea there will be another rate rise in December, and quite likely to see three more next year during 2019. This is already priced into the dollar in my opinion, and watching the market's reaction since the publication of the minutes, I think that's pretty much the general consensus that was already priced in. What was interesting was reading in between the lines, and there was sort of, if we can call it that, there was sort of a threat left hanging in the air that the Fed may decide to go beyond the neutral level in order to avoid overheating of the American economy. This is regardless of all the problems this may bring to, for example, emerging markets, emerging economies, which is already been quite problematic if you look at Turkey and Argentina, for example,
Yep.
India more recently too. But the main concern of the Fed is avoiding overheating of the American economy. I mean, the economy is doing brilliantly at the moment, 2% inflation, or almost 2% inflation. I mean, the lowest unemployment rate for the last 60 years, I think. Fastest growth in decades as well. With the added factor that President Trump threw in of the fiscal stimulus, so there's quite a risk that the American economy may start overheating soon at the same time as growth will stall.
Yep.
And this is not good news. So I think this is what many market movers read into what was published yesterday, and perhaps that is why the dollar didn't react so positively and is sort of on the back foot this morning against, for example, the pound and the euro.
Okay, so let's move on. I was in Brussels yesterday. You're a good European. What on earth is going on with Brexit?
Well, it seems that we are becoming somehow numb to.
Well, I spent a day there yesterday, and I'm very numb.
Well, I can't blame you. It's been dragging on for a long time. The latest seems to point to a desire from both parts that are at the table to sort of extend the transition period. Yep. In order to avoid making any decisions right now. Of course, this is not being welcomed by a faction within the British camp who is campaigning for a hard Brexit, for a complete cut, for a fresh start. And I think what we need to watch now is not so much how the British negotiating team will interact with their European counterparts. I think it's more how this process will be managed within the British camp. So this is the trickiest part. I think Prime Minister Theresa May will have a hard time selling this idea to some of the fiercest supporters of Brexit, even within her own cabinet. And this is likely to have an impact on the pound, because we all know the pound at the moment is not doing too badly. Its cable is roughly around 131. But should there be a no Brexit outcome, for example, I mean, it wouldn't surprise anybody to see it going down to as low as 110,
yep.
For example. And on the other hand, should there be an announcement towards the end of the year or early next year that actually the two parts reached an agreement, even if it is an agreement to delay a final agreement, And so for the time being, buying some time. This could see the pound holding on to current levels and even climbing up to as high as 140.
That sounds very romantic to me. I'm pretty sure I know which way I would be. Okay, let's wrap up. Let's talk a little bit about oil. We've had a pullback. We've obviously got this Saudi situation now. We're going into this Iran situation. What are your thoughts for oil?
Well, oil is an interesting one. Obviously, there's been issues with the supply. And I think the most interesting point to gather from what's been happening recently is that the Saudis decided to threat to use the nuclear option, as a matter of speaking, which is to weaponize oil supply like they did in the early 70s, in 73, I think it was, over 40 years ago. This could be really tricky, and then if the Saudis were to be pushed into a corner, God knows what would happen, because the current crown prince, he's been described by an American senator as being a wrecking ball and toxic. So I think he's quite trigger happy. And who knows what could happen if they were to be pushed into a corner. And perhaps that is why President Trump is taking so much effort to try to create sort of a screen of smoke and mirrors around the whole issue, saying that perhaps it was a rogue element within the Saudi camp that did it without the knowledge of the crown prince and of the king. We don't know. The matter of the fact is that this situation is threatening to escalate still. Saudi Arabia is today more isolated in the field of international politics and diplomacy. And this is not good news for the United States, because they are trying to isolate Iran. The US clearly, at least since President Trump came into power, there is a clear strategy which involve completely changing the approach with Iran. We don't really know what the ultimate target there is. It could be even taking over the whole production of oil there by whichever means. So oil for the moment is staying quiet, but if I was trading oil, I would be keeping a very close eye on it, because should the rhetorics escalate, and should there be some action, some actual action from the Saudi side, because we cannot forget that the Saudi are very close. Saudi Arabia is very closely linked with other big producers in the region, like Bahrain and Kuwait and the UAE as well. So I would keep a very close eye on it, because I don't think we've heard the last of this story, this very gruesome story. Poor Mr. Khashoggi. Not a nice day for him.
No.
Definitely.
On that note, Ricardo, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nick.